The Nebraska defense was on stage Tuesday in Lincoln at spring practice, and one defender suddenly looks ready for the big stage this fall.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins.
All right, good morning, everybody. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Happy transfer portal opening day, round 2 or round 1, depending on how you look at it. I do have, just so we know, we're recording this right about 8 o'clock in the morning. I do have Twitter.
News.
I'm opening the Twitter feed just to see if anything comes across. I'm sure people will be excited to know that Nico Iamaleava is indeed in the portal with a do not contact tag this morning, interestingly enough. So there's that.
Yeah, I just don't think he wants to hear from like 40 schools.
Apparently people are doing that now to they just don't want to have their phone blown up. They want to just run everything through their agent, which it's like a kind of a misuse of the do not contact tag. But anyway, that's a different thing.
I was talking about the portal yesterday at a middle school track meet with like a novice college football fan. Like, what exactly is happening was basically the question. And I said, well, it's kind of like if in the NFL, every player became a free agent on the same day, twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Twice a year. That's the important part. And sometimes just like every day, they're always a free agent. But yeah, it's not exactly healthy right now in college football. But we digress and we head back to Nebraska, where they have a bunch of players on their roster that they're trying to keep. I'm sure that they will have some players enter the portal today, and we'll try and keep you updated on that as much as we can. Heard from a couple that plan to be there this fall, like Ceyair Wright, the actor, who is now a returning starter, I think, in the secondary. And we've talked a lot about Nebraska's cornerback secondary room this year and how it has some depth there. Also heard from Riley Van Poppel, who we're going to make sort of the focus of our first segment here. And they seem, Riley and the Nebraska staff seem really ready to sort of elevate him into a feature role on this defense and take over for, the guys that they lost on the defensive line last year. I'll say this right out of the gate. I was, and maybe still am a little bit skeptical of how they handled Riley Van Poppel last year with his red shirt. My main thing on red shirts has been you don't know if you're going to have them in 3 years. So why save that extra year of eligibility for that exact time? But he didn't progress a year in the eligibility clock last year. And now Nebraska has a lot of Riley Van Poppel in front of him, and he's just going into his best days now.
He walked out through the door. He barely fit through the door, by the way, to get into the media room at the Hawks Championship Center, looking like cyborg Van Poppel. Like, he's huge. He's like if you built a D lineman in a lab, which is kind of, I guess, what Nebraska did during his redshirt season, then I think he would look like Riley Van Poppel. Gone is his neck, and it's replaced by big giant tree trunk arms, and he looks like one of those defensive linemen that Nebraska had in the 90s who you could just kind of pencil in year 3 to be an all-conference guy, and then contend for all-American honors on his way to the NFL. And I'm not predicting that Riley Van Poppel is going to take that path. The game is different today than it was 30 years ago, for sure, in a lot of ways. But the plan with him seems to be working, by appearances and by listening to him, his mentality about football. Now that Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker and Jamari Butler are gone from the defense, the torch has been passed to several players, but he seems to be the one that like gets the most attention. I'd say that like has the is ready to break out. Like I wrote about breakout candidates or players who were having breakout springs on the offensive side last week after we heard from Dana Holgerson and EJ Barthel and talked about Quentin Ives in that conversation. Riley Van Poppel is that guy on the defensive side. I think there are some others, but he's the one that I would definitely put in that category. And it's essential that he stays on that track because of the lack of depth that Nebraska has up front.
Yeah, and I think you have to, back to the redshirt thing a little bit. So if you're catching up here, he played his freshman year in 2023 at Nebraska, and then played 4 games in 2024, which maintained his year of eligibility. So he'll be going into his redshirt sophomore year now at Nebraska instead of his junior season. And they figured, well, it would be, his role would be in a much limited capacity this year. Can we survive without him, play some other guys, and really lean heavily on Ty Robinson and Nash Upmaker up front? And the answer to that question was yes. But in order to so I think this is where the credit to Riley comes in, because in order to do that, first of all, you have to communicate it really clearly. And I think it takes it takes a special type of person to like kind of agree to that. They know it's going to be difficult going through the season, watching everybody, people who you are in front of on the depth chart play and try to make a difference for you on the defensive side of the ball. And they missed him, I guess, in places where they could have really used him last year in games where he really wasn't allowed to play because they wanted to keep the red shirt. And I know it was difficult for the coaching staff as well, because they felt a couple times, outside of those 4 games, they were like, dang, we gotta get this guy in the game. Let's just burn it. I assume they were close to that a lot last year. And so you have to be sure that he is going to stick around and have the right attitude through it and fight through it. And it just sounds like all that has checked the boxes. And the goal of him being a more complete player after the redshirt season has really come to fruition here.
It's a big gamble. It was a big gamble what Nebraska did, because what if Ty or Nash would have needed to miss a couple of games with a minor injury? Well, then you pretty much have to play Van Poppel, and all of the games previous to that where he sat would have been wasted.
Yep.
Because then he gets in 6 or 7 games, and it's like you might as well have played him in all 13, but he didn't. So I don't think you're going to see this be a thing that Nebraska does regularly. They may do it with 0 players in 2025 and like 1 in 2026. But it did work out with him. And part of the reason that it worked out with Riley, like you said, is because he was on board and there was a lot of communication. The other risk you run is that everybody acts like it's okay. I think about a specific situation in volleyball where this happened at Nebraska a couple of years ago with Caroline Juravicius, and everybody thinks it's okay. And then at the end, when you're ready to move on and ready to get to the place where, all right, now the red shirt's over and this player is going to come into our rotation and be a starter or whatever, they go in the portal the next day. And in the worst possible case with the volleyball analogy, they then go on to lead that team that they transfer to a national championship, beating your team in the process. So there's the complete disaster scenario. I don't think that's going to happen or was ever necessarily a threat with Riley Van Poppel. But like on the other side of it, what it allowed Van Poppel to do, because he as a defensive lineman was a player who needed to put on some size and needed to focus on some things that are more difficult to do if you're getting ready for a game every Saturday in the fall. Like he could lift a little bit different and train a little harder and maybe focus a little bit more on like the nutrition aspect of things if he didn't have to worry 8 weeks during the fall about, all right, I got to be ready to go in a game on Saturday. And he talked about like the perspective that it allowed him to have too, just knowing that he wasn't worried about game plans and like what the offense was going to do. So yeah, it's like if you can make it work it's fantastic. And I think he's definitely come out on the other side better for it. But like, also, this is a guy who played big time high school football in the state of Texas. And I'm sure there were a lot of players who he was around when he was in high school, who he saw last year in their second seasons of college, whether it's at schools in Texas or all over the country, who were breaking out and having their moments. And there he was redshirting after getting a taste of it. So credit to him. Credit to Matt Rule and his staff for making it work, and it looks like it's going to pay dividends this fall.
Well, you hope you could get that, you hope you could get that extra year, or, whatever that means for him. Now, maybe he ends up being a pro at the end of 4 years, or, so he only has 2 left instead of 3 or something like that. So
that's fine too.
Right, exactly. So
because he should be better in 25 than he would have been in 25 if he had played last season, in theory. Now, if you have him in 2027 as a 5th-year senior, and he's the star of your defense, he's Ndamukong Suh, 18 years after Ndamukong Suh did that in 2009 as a 5th-year senior. Well, yeah, then you've hit a home run, but that's somewhat unlikely, I think.
Yeah, that would be the exact opposite of the volleyball scenario that you laid out earlier, like the direct opposite. So plenty of interesting things going on in that defensive line. We'll move back on the defense and sort of zoom out a little bit. John Butler speaking again yesterday. What's going on with his defense as they try to hone things in for 2025? We'll be back with that next. But first, a word from our friends from the FanDuel Sportsbook, where the NBA playoffs are indeed here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite team, diving into player props. That is huge in the NBA. 3-pointers, steals, assists, same game parlays. It's all there for you. And there's constant action happening every night, really from now until the middle of June in the NBA playoffs. So you could jump in at any time you'd like with FanDuel, and the live betting feature as well. Live in-game, same game parlays. They're there for you. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com, claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
All right, welcome back. It's Wednesday at the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Spring is almost over for Nebraska. They are 11 practices in. All that's left are just a couple of workouts next week, one on Thursday, and then the Husker games. So we will have updates from Matt Rule's meeting with the media tomorrow, and then the Huskers are going to take the weekend off to in recognition of Easter, to allow players to celebrate that holiday. So a couple of notes from Nebraska sports on Tuesday. Speaking of volleyball, there was a mention of it in the first segment. A little bit more positive news from the positive development, positive story from the Nebraska camp on Tuesday. Lexi Rodriguez won the Sullivan Award, presented to the top amateur athlete in the country annually. She is the first ever from Nebraska to do that, and just the third volleyball player ever to win that award. So huge accomplishment from the former Nebraska libero, who's now playing for or just finished her rookie season with the Love Omaha team professionally. Nebraska baseball beat Creighton 6-3 on Tuesday night at Charles Schwab Field. Dylan Carey with a 3-for-3 effort at the plate. So how was that? First of all, you were there, Connor. What was the atmosphere like? It was pretty warm out, so decent crowd.
I think they got I think they announced about 6,000, which is a little bit more than it's been. I mean, since COVID, that game just hasn't really been super highly attended. So I thought they had a pretty good crowd last night, and like you said, it was a nice night. Carey hit 3 balls hard. I mean, and so Nebraska just had a little bit more on offense, and their bullpen was good. They shut down Creighton from about the 4th inning on. So Yeah, took care of business last night. Finally got off the schneid a little bit in that series. They hadn't won a game since the end of 2023, almost 2 years, against Creighton. So yeah, that could supply. I mean, we've said this a lot for Nebraska baseball this year, but that could supply the momentum that they need going into a weekend conference series. And then they lost 2 out of 3 at Iowa last week. So you really got to go now. I mean, it's all in front of you. You have to win series on the weekend, if not sweep them.
Yeah, just to check in with where they're at. Nebraska's 17-20 overall. That's kind of irrelevant at this point, sadly, because what they're playing for is to win the Big Ten tournament and get into the postseason. And it's in Omaha, so they can catch fire. They have the team that's capable of doing it. We've seen it more often in the midweek, but it's not an impossibility. Nebraska is 5-10. And this is what it comes down to. Make the Big Ten tournament before you think about winning the Big Ten tournament. Nebraska's 5-10 in the league going into this series at home this weekend against Northwestern. They're 1 game out of 12th place in the conference. That's what it takes. 12 teams make the Big Ten tournament next month in Omaha. Huskers are tied for 14th with Minnesota and Purdue. So it's an ominous place to be in, but they're just a couple of games out of being in a better spot, or 1 game out of being in a better spot. And Northwestern is one of those teams that's just right ahead of them. So big weekend for Will Bolt and the Nebraska baseball team at Haymarket Park starting on Friday.
Yep. Go time for Nebraska baseball. John Butler. So he put a hat on. This is a disappointing development. He put a hat on at his most recent press conference on Tuesday after we talked. We lauded him for his hair, for the skullet. But we did say he would look, he along with Dana Holgerson would each look good in hats, with the flow coming out of the back. So
Dana's been doing that.
Hair. He threw on a hat at the press conference. That's my main story.
Yeah, he talked. He came in and mentioned it and said that something about like blowback on social media, that influenced his decision or motivated him to no longer go with the skullet look at the press conference. So I don't know. It's John Butler's got an interesting. He's got like a pretty intense personality. And it was hard. He said, like, oh, that was my little attempt at humor. Like everybody there's like a little bit of a nervous laugh. Like everybody's a little bit nervous. And then and then everybody's a little nervous. And then it was like, oh, it was a joke. Okay. Yeah.
It looks like a joke. Yeah.
But I don't know. I kind of liked the John Butler that we got on Tuesday. Like he was a little bit more like, fist on the podium. Like, this is how it is. This is my defense. We're doing this well. I think that's probably representative of his growth and comfort level as a defensive coordinator at Nebraska. You still remember that John Butler has been in Lincoln for less than a year, like 9 months. He's been in Lincoln, came in to coach the DBs right before training camp last season, and then was thrust into the role of defensive coordinator in December, a few days before Nebraska had to leave to go to New York and play in the Pinstripe Bowl. So while the months of January, February, March, and April are not really a time to like lay back and take it easy as a coordinator, as a football coach, it's got to feel, by comparison to the rest of his time in Lincoln, to be pretty nice. Like, get a breath, take a breath, like maybe look around, visit some areas of the campus that you've not been to, check out the other corner of the facility that isn't like connected to your office. And you can kind of see that in Butler a little bit in this second time that we've had a chance to visit with him this spring.
Yeah, moving along a little slower, which is a good thing. Him and Dana Holgerson, right? Just, okay, this is the job now. This is what we have to do on a daily basis. But no, it was good to hear him talk about, I mean, we've talked a little bit, Mitch, you and I, about how it just feels like they're a little bit more athletic and faster on defense. I think they've been trying to do the kind of positionless thing. And so in order to do that, your personnel has to match it. And it feels like they're matching what they're trying to do on defense to their personnel, as they did last year, as they have the last 2 years, where they were kind of bigger and stockier and they want to hold you up and keep you in front of them. So I'm excited to see what the defense looks like. But you add in guys like Desan McCullough and Marcus Watson-Trent, and another year from, Willis McGahee and Vincent Shavers. I think they have some guys who can really get after it as far as rushing the passer is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are coming at you on a blitz. McGahee plays the jack linebacker, which it sounds like is basically going to help convert Nebraska in a lot of situations into a 4-man front. So it's not so much a blitz there if it's McGahee, and same thing with McCullough. But Jamin Wright for sure coming out of the second level, or maybe they bring him up to the edge. I mean, I guess that's still kind of a blitz if it's a linebacker. But Watson-Trent for sure, Shavers, those guys are going to be blitzers, and I think they have some guys in the secondary who can come in and really disrupt things in the pass rush in the right situation. That's something that Butler brought up on Tuesday. He wasn't asked specific. I think he was asked a question about what do you like about this defense? And the first place that he went, or one of the first places he went, was that he thinks that they're going to be a good blitzing team. So there were some times last year at the beginning, I believe it was the beginning of the year, where Tony White's defense was kind of dead set on not blitzing, and then the numbers crept up as the year went along. It might have been something where they didn't want to put on tape before playing Colorado and Shedeur Sanders, but I don't think this team's going to disguise it. Like, I think they're not going to make a whole lot of attempt to hide the fact that they're an aggressive defense, and as long as they can be physical and tackle well, which is another area that Butler brought up, then it's all good. Like it should work out well. He talked about the back seven and the depth they have in the back seven, which indicates that you have a front four, which is a deviation from playing the 3-3-5 if you have a front four. So more multiple looks, kind of beating the same drum that we've heard from Matt Rule and Phil Snow and others this offseason.
Okay, so as we make our way back ultimately to the back end of the defense in this podcast today, that's a really good place to leave off, and we'll talk about that next. In order to do what we think Nebraska is going to do, you have to have some guys who can cover back there, and you got to have some guys who can cover in one-on-one situations and tackle and make plays. So heard from Ceyair Wright yesterday. We'll discuss that when we return on our final segment next. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Friday Mailbag Show is just a couple days away. Get your mailbag questions in for that. I think we've seen the mailbag, get a little bit fatter over the last couple of weeks, which is good. We're a year deep into the show now, so people are starting asking more questions, which is a good thing. Keep asking.
If you're listening and you haven't contributed to the mailbag, and you're just relying on some of our regulars, we've got Mitch and GI, we've got Vince and Napa. Who sent in the Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, Dylan Raiola collage? I can't remember. I'm gonna have to go back and look. Yeah. Legendary mailbag question. We've got Gigi in New Mexico who likes to watch us before dinner. So hello, Gigi. If you're not one of those people, send us some questions. Like we want some more regulars, and as we get past the spring, like now's the time to really kind of open up and have some fun with the mailbag, talk about some other stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't want to lean too hard on the regulars. So get involved in the Friday Mailbag Show. Okay, let's pick back up where we left off. You got to have some defensive backs who can cover if you want to be more aggressive on defense. And I think also, that's a two-way street. Not only do you have to have the guys who could cover, you also have to trust them to cover, from the coaching staff perspective as well. And that's not something that I've felt that's been there completely over the last 2 years. Certainly not last year. So what's different about it this year?
Well, last year they were playing a couple safeties out of position and having them at corner because Tommy Hill got hurt in the early portions of the season. Bly Hill got hurt before the season began and was never able to regain the form that Nebraska saw in the spring. There was a time around 1 year ago right now, heading into the spring game, where Nebraska was like, all right, we got Hill and Hill at corner, and you feel pretty good about that because of who they are and the skills that they have. And then Bly went down with a knee injury in the spring game, and Tommy had the foot that bothered him really the whole season after Colorado.
Yep.
So they found Ceyair Wright, kind of a gift that fell in Nebraska. Imagine where Nebraska would have been in 2024 without Ceyair Wright, and he came late. He was not, one of these portal entries that showed up in December or January. It was a summer thing with Ceyair Wright. His football future was kind of cloudy after his final year at USC. And then they had to go with Marquise Buford, Malcolm Hartzog, who are safeties by trade, play them at corner and just kind of wait on the young players who started to come on late in the year, talking about Donovan Jones and Mario Buford and even Jeremiah Charles to a certain degree. But they weren't there. They weren't there all year. And, you just couldn't trust them in games like UCLA and Indiana and some of the others that got away from Nebraska in the area of man-to-man coverage. And if you're going to blitz and you're going to bring pressure and you're going to be multiple on defense and do lots of stuff up front to cause havoc, and you're going to support your run defense, maybe you're a little light in the D line and you want to support that D line with the linebackers, then man, you better be good in man-to-man coverage, and you better be able to put guys on an island. And both Rule and John Butler have mentioned here in the past few days that they like what Nebraska does in man coverage and the way that they're able to cover people. Rule went so far as to say that he thinks they have 6 corners who could start right now.
Yeah, he said that over the weekend. So, fast forward ahead from where you were a year ago when you thought it would be Hill and Hill, and that plan went sideways pretty much immediately. So we talked about Wright. Deshaun Singleton is back for his 90th year of college football. Hartzog is still back there. Buford is still back there in the right position, Marcus Buford. Bly Hill returns. Andrew Marshall enters the conversation. And then you have, and that's just kind of to start with the older guys back there. Donovan Jones, flashed at the end of last year. I imagine that's a guy that's going to get some playing time this year. Sure. You have, who am I missing in that conversation?
Mario. I mean, the guys I mentioned, Mario Buford is a corner, and Jeremiah Charles is still there as a corner too. He's a year older than Mario Buford.
We also don't talk about Justin Rhett, the transfer from Georgia, who's kind of in the mix back there as well.
I think he's a safety, or that's where he was at Georgia. But not a name that we've heard discussed at all this spring. So would have been good to ask about him. Jameer Khan is another guy that they brought in from the FCS level in the secondary, and they're just stacking bodies back there and like seeing who works out, like who rises to the top, and then the ones who don't. Probably going to be in the portal. You might have somebody go in the portal who came in from the portal in January. That's not out of the question. Jameer Khan has been hurt this spring. So I wonder, when Rule said 6 corners, like immediately I'm like, okay, who are the 6? And Ceyair Wright, Andrew Marshall, Donovan Jones, Mario Buford, Jeremiah Charles. That's 5. And then I wonder if he's talking about Bly Hill as the 6th, or if they've seen something from Jameer Khan, if he's been able to go and give them anything, while coming back from injury. I don't know. The 6th guy, I mean, Bly was definitely in that position before he got hurt, but we just haven't heard enough about him and how he's recovered from the knee. Yeah.
And as you mentioned before, it all sort of all roads lead back to the portal, right? And so when we asked the question a couple days ago of what's a position that you could see, taking a couple of hits here, it would be in the defensive backs room, whether it be the safeties or the corners, just because of the plethora of the people that we all mentioned. It's a place where they can kind of take it back there. So, it's been, according to all people who have been around the team, it's been pretty fierce competition back there. And it sounds like the young guys are pushing as well, guys that we haven't even mentioned in this segment. So, I think it's a real battle of who sticks around and who vies for playing time this year and who puts themselves in position to potentially make a difference for Nebraska in the future as well. All that is kind of getting sorted out right now. It might have been one of the biggest roster things that we are looking at this spring, as far as what it means for the fall and then going forward after that.
Hey, one note too on Ceyair Wright, the actor who had about 10 minutes in front of the media on Tuesday. He was asked if he's been acting at all in his time in Lincoln, and he said no, but he has an internship in Omaha at Fallon Giant Films. So not familiar with this company, but Ceyair has been visiting our little metro area here, Connor, and doing some like production work, like working with directors of a film company. So nice to see that the LA kid is able to find his thing here in flyover country.
Yeah, I've always said that Omaha is a place. It's kind of like LA in a lot of different ways. There's just a lot of opportunities for young aspiring actors, film producers, things like that. So I'm glad Ceyair was able to hop on an opportunity.
I mean, they need to like connect him up with Alexander Payne or something like that.
That's all we got.
It is, but it's a good one.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's his style, if that's what he's going for. But I think you jump on whatever opportunity you can at such a young age, right?
See him like doing a remake of Sideways. It's a California-based film. You could get Ceyair in there. He probably likes a fine wine.
Yeah, exactly. That's an option for him. Didn't he do the movie with Matt Damon where everybody was little, that was filmed in Omaha?
Oh, I didn't see that. He did Election in Omaha. Ceyair's a youthful looking guy. He could play a character in like a high school student in that. Reprise the role of Matthew Broderick maybe.
Yeah, Downsizing. Alexander Payne. They filmed a lot of this movie in Omaha. My dad was actually he was like a passerby in this movie, where they filmed it several years ago now. But Matt Damon was in town for a while, and Kristen Wiig was in there. Basically, everybody becomes tiny, and I never saw the movie, but yeah, if we're going back and retroactively placing Ceyair Wright into Alexander Payne movies, which is what it seems like we're doing on this segment, that is an option. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. With that, I think we should probably end this show.
Okay. That's probably good.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. NFL Draft is coming up as your favorite collegiate players get ready to move to the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.